Jungwa's hands went still. Not slow. Not gradual. Still. The kind of still that comes after 2 years of searching a city that swallowed someone whole. New York's most feared Korean Mafia boss. Standing in the back of a cathedral, he had entered to bury an enemy. And then, the doors at the far end opened, and white silk moved through them. His eyes traveled down the aisle. Slowly. The way a man looks when his mind is already refusing what his body already knows. Past the veil. Past the trembling bouquet. Past the hands that gripped white roses like they were the only solid thing left. And landed on her face. Alicia. The room went deathly silent. Not because they heard him say her name. Because he hadn't said it. Hadn't breathed. Hadn't moved a single inch. 2 years. Gone. Hidden. And she was walking toward another man's altar. The question that rose in Jungwa's chest wasn't quiet. But the voice that asked it, barely above a whisper, was, did she ever leave? The veil itched at Alicia's temples. She didn't move to adjust it. Didn't breathe too deeply. Didn't look up from the floor of the bridal suite. Because if she looked up, someone might see her face clearly. And if someone saw her face clearly, they might see what was underneath the powder. The concealer. The 2 careful layers of joy she had practiced in the mirror every morning for the last 3 weeks. 2 years in New York. 2 years of learning to become someone else. And it had brought her here. To a white dress. To a cathedral on Fifth Avenue. To a man named Anthony Roger, who wore his money like armor and called her his like it meant something soft. Her hands gripped the bouquet. White roses. Cold-stemmed. Already wilting at the edges from the heat of her grip. Her cousin Deja appeared in the doorway behind her. Warm brown skin. Natural locks pinned back. Eyes that had known Alicia since they were 7 years old and therefore knew, without being told, that something was wrong. You don't have to do this, Deja said. Quietly. The way you say something to a person you already know won't listen. I know, Alicia said. Which wasn't the same as I'm fine. And Deja knew that. But Alicia was already moving toward the door. A year ago she had been different. Not better. Not worse. But different. She'd worn her hair loose in Seoul's winter wind. Slept in sheets that cost more than her first apartment. Eaten at tables where no one handed you a menu, because they already knew what you wanted before you sat down. She had been loved in a language that sounded like danger and felt, some mornings, like the only real thing she had ever touched. And then the men came. 3 of them. Suits. The kind of stillness that doesn't mean calm, it means trained. They sat across from her in a hotel lobby she'd been waiting in. And they spoke in the specific, unhurried tone of people who have already decided how a conversation ends. Leave the country, the one in the middle said. Not a request. Not a suggestion. Leave him, or we place the evidence with the Federal Bureau by Thursday morning. Every transaction. Every transfer. Every signature that carries his name. A pause. And yours. She'd sat very still. Her coffee is going cold in front of her. You're the only variable he won't see coming, the man said. He'll dismantle everything to find you, which means he'll stop watching everything else. The implication was clinical, deliberate, monstrous in how reasonable it sounded. They needed her to vanish so he would chase the wrong thing while they moved. She had run, not for herself, for Jungwa, because the one unbearable thought, worse than hiding, worse than losing him, worse than 2 years of white rose bouquets and borrowed names, was the thought of him burning for her. Across the city, Jungwa didn't sit. He never sat at his own desk. He stood behind it, both hands flat on the surface, eyes moving across the Manhattan skyline like a man who had already calculated the weight of every building and found them all insufficient. The penthouse was 43 floors above the noise, above the grid. Above the ordinary machinery of a city that ran, in more ways than most people understood, on systems he controlled. 3 senators had called that morning. He hadn't answered. A rival syndicate head from Chicago had sent a formal peace offering, a transfer, 7 figures, routed through a shell company in Luxembourg. Jungwa had returned it, untouched. A sitting federal judge owed him a verdict by Thursday. He would receive it. None of it required his attention. None of it required anything from him at all. He was the infrastructure. The city moved because he allowed it to move. And none of it, not one single acquisition, not one verdict, not one senator, had located Alicia Voss in 2 years. His lieutenant, Quan Beck, entered without knocking. That was permitted. Quan Beck was one of 4 people on Earth who had earned that. Still nothing from the Boston Trace, Quan Beck said. He didn't apologize. He knew better. Yoonghwa said nothing for a long moment. Outside, a cloud moved across the afternoon sun, and the skyline went gray. She didn't go to Boston, Yoonghwa said. The documents suggest. She knew I'd follow the documents. A silence. Quan Beck had known Yoonghwa since they were 17. Had watched him negotiate with men who made governments nervous. Had watched him absorb loss with a face like carved stone. He had never, in 19 years, watched him look like this. Like a man standing at the edge of something that hadn't healed. She was the only one, Yoonghwa said. Not to Quan Beck, exactly. More to the window. To the gray city. To the specific, unresolvable absence of one woman in 10 million people. The only person who ever looked at me like I was still a choice, not an outcome. His jaw tightened. And I let them take that from her. Because that was what kept him awake at 3 in the morning, not the uncertainty of where she was, but the certainty of why she'd left. She hadn't abandoned him. She'd been moved. Like a piece on a board he hadn't been watching carefully enough. And the man who moved her was getting married today. Yoonghwa's phone screen lit up on the desk. Quan Beck's eyes dropped to it. An invitation. Gold-edged. Embossed with the name Anthony Roger. Attendance at St. Matthias Cathedral. 4 o'clock. You're going, Quan Beck said. Not a question. He thinks I'm coming to watch him win, Yoonghwa said. He picked up his jacket. Dark. Perfectly cut. Not a thread out of place. Let him. I think the organ music filled the cathedral like water filling a room. Slow. Rising. Inevitable. 400 guests rose to their feet in one smooth, rehearsed motion. White peonies lined every pew. Candlelight flickered across marble floors. The kind of wedding that cost enough to be a statement. Anthony Roger telling New York exactly who he was by the square footage of his ceremony. Yoonghwa stood at the back. He hadn't taken a seat. He never took a seat in a room he hadn't chosen to enter freely. Quan Beck stood 2 steps behind him. Still, watching the exits the way he always watched exits. The guests around them shifted subtly, the way a crowd shifts when something with mass and temperature moves through it without announcing itself. 3 people glanced at Yoonghwa's face and looked away quickly. He didn't notice. He was watching the doors at the far end of the aisle. They opened, and white silk moved through them. The congregation released a collective breath, that soft, involuntary sound people make when something beautiful enters a room and they haven't decided yet whether it comforts them or breaks something loose in their chest. Yoonghwa's eyes moved down the aisle, past the candles, past the flowers, past the 400 faces turned like sunflowers toward the door. The bride walked slowly, her natural curls pinned beneath a cathedral veil, her warm brown skin catching the candlelight in a way that made the white dress look deliberate, like it had been chosen for her, not borrowed from someone else's idea of a wedding. Her hands gripped white roses. Tight. Too tight. Yoonghwa's gaze traveled upward, past the bouquet, past the veil's edge, past the jaw he had known by the particular way it set when she was carrying something she refused to say aloud, and landed on her face. The organ continued. The candles continued. 400 people continued breathing. Yoonghwa did not. Alicia. 2 syllables. He didn't say them. They moved through him instead, like a door kicked open in a room he had sealed shut and guarded for 2 years. Something cracked in his expression. Shock. Disbelief. Then something darker and quieter that had no clean name. Quan Beck stepped forward instinctively. Yoonghwa. But Yoonghwa had already taken 1 step down the aisle. Just one. Unconscious. Involuntary. The body remembering something the mind had spent 2 years trying to file away. Alicia's eyes were fixed ahead. On the altar. On Anthony. On the carefully constructed future she had built from the wreckage of disappearing. She hadn't seen him yet. Hadn't felt the specific shift in air pressure that a room produces when Yoonghwa enters it. Hadn't felt it yet. One more step. 2. And then she looked up. Their eyes met across the length of the cathedral. Across 2 years, across white roses and borrowed names, across every mile of distance she had placed between them. And the bouquet slipped. White roses scattering across the marble. Soundless. Devastating. The cathedral went completely, absolutely, breathlessly still. Yoonghwa's voice came low, barely above a whisper. For words. Were you ever real? 400 people in that cathedral. And the only 2 who stopped breathing were the ones with 2 years of silence standing between them. Here's what I need to know, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you had disappeared to protect someone you loved, and they found you at the worst possible moment, would you stay and explain? Or would you run again? Drop your answer below. And if you are not subscribed yet, Alicia's bouquet is already on the floor. Yoonghwa's jaw is already set. Whatever comes next happens only for subscribers. Hit the button. Right now. The side corridor smelled like cold stone and old candles. Alicia walked fast. Not running. Running would draw attention. Running would confirm what her body was already screaming, that the last 2 years had just collapsed into a single moment of eye contact across 400 witnesses. She pushed through a heavy door. A vestibule. Narrow. Dark except for one high window letting in gray afternoon light. She pressed her back against the wall. Bouquet gone. Hands empty. Breathing in short, fractured pulls. Think. Think. You have 30 seconds before someone comes looking. The door opened. Yoonghwa filled the frame. He didn't rush in. He stepped through, controlled, deliberate, and let the door fall shut behind him. The sound of the organ disappeared. Just stone walls now. And silence. And him. Alicia lifted her chin. Yoonghwa. Don't. One word. Flat. The specific flatness of a man holding something enormous completely still. His eyes moved across her face. The way you look at something you memorized and are now checking against the original. 2 years, he said. Not an accusation. Not yet. Something worse. An inventory. No call. No letter. No trace. His jaw tightened. I had people in 12 cities, Alicia. Something broke in her expression. Not her composure. Deeper than that. I know, she whispered. Then tell me why. Her hands moved to the inside of her dress. A small folded envelope. Worn at the creases. The kind of worn that comes from being unfolded and refolded by hands that needed to remember why they were suffering. She held it out. He didn't take it immediately. He looked at her face first. At the specific expression of a woman handing over the one thing she hoped would explain everything and feared would explain nothing. Then he took it. Unfolded it. 3 documents. The first, a transaction record. His name. His account numbers. Transfers routed through 3 shell companies to a federal narcotics supplier. Fabricated. Every digit. But constructed with the kind of precision that doesn't announce itself as false. The second, a testimony. Signed. Notarized. A witness placing Yoonghwa at a meeting he had never attended in a building he had never entered. The third, a photograph. Alicia stared at the wall while he looked at it. She had memorized his silence by now. The particular quality of it when something hit him that he hadn't calculated. They came to me in the lobby of the Meridian, she said. Quietly. 3 men. Suits. Calm. Her voice didn't shake. She had rehearsed this moment so many times the words had worn smooth. They said if I stayed, if you kept looking for me, kept being distracted, they would file everything by Thursday morning. A pause. They said you'd burn trying to protect me. Yoonghwa looked up from the photograph. So you protected me instead. Not a question. She met his eyes. You would have done the same. Something moved across his face. Not softness. Something older than softness. He refolded the documents. Placed them inside his jacket. against his chest. "No one touches you again," he said. Low. Absolute. Not Anthony Roger. Not the men who sent you running. Not the city. Not anyone. He looked at her directly. "That is the last promise I will ever have to make you." The vestibule door exploded inward. Two men. Dark suits. The specific build of people paid to end conversations before they become problems. Anthony Rogers' security. The larger one looked at Alicia first, the way a man looks at property that has wandered outside its designated boundary. "Mr. Roger is asking for his bride," he said. The word has landed like a hand on a shoulder. Alicia's jaw tightened. She didn't move. Youngwa didn't turn around immediately. He finished straightening his jacket. Unhurried. The way a man moves when the concept of being interrupted has never once applied to him. Then he turned and looked at the two men with the particular quality of stillness that doesn't require volume or movement or any announcement whatsoever. The larger man's confidence flickered. Just slightly. Just enough. "This doesn't concern." "Leave." One word from Youngwa, delivered at the temperature of something that has never needed to be repeated. The two men looked at each other. A calculation happening behind their eyes, the kind that runs very fast when the body recognizes, before the mind catches up, that the danger in front of it is not the performative kind. They left. The door swung shut. Alicia released a breath she hadn't realized she had been compressing since the moment she walked into this corridor. Her knees registered it first. A slight, involuntary softening. Youngwa was beside her before she'd finished exhaling. Not touching her. Close. The way he had always occupied her space. Present without consuming, near without demanding. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I've been walking for 2 years," she said. The corner of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. The memory of the specific expression she had drawn out of him in the early months when he was still deciding whether she was something he was allowed to want. "There's a car at the east entrance," he said. "Quan Beck is already outside. Anthony will." "Anthony," Youngwa said, with the measured, unbothered tone of a man filing something permanently in the irrelevant column, "is the least important person in this building." She followed him through the corridor. Stone arches. Flickering sconces. The muffled confusion of 400 wedding guests beginning to understand that something had deviated significantly from the program. Youngwa walked slightly ahead, not pulling her, not gripping her wrist the way Anthony always gripped, like ownership was something you demonstrated through pressure. Just ahead, creating a path, the way he had always done in rooms that weren't built for her. Alicia watched the set of his shoulders. 2 years. She had spent 2 years constructing a version of herself that didn't reach for those shoulders in the dark, that didn't hear his voice in quiet rooms and mistake it for safety. She hadn't fully succeeded. She wasn't sure, walking behind him now, that she had ever intended to. The east door opened onto gray afternoon air. Cold. Clean. New York in November, indifferent and enormous and somehow, in this specific moment, exactly the right size. Quan Beck stood beside a black car, his face carrying the expression of a man who had prepared for many outcomes and was quietly relieved by the one that had arrived. He opened the door without a word. Alicia stopped at the threshold, looked back once at the cathedral, the white peonies visible through the tall windows, the candles still burning for a ceremony that was no longer happening. Then she looked at Youngwa. He was watching her, not with urgency, not with possession, with the patient, unflinching attention of a man who had waited 2 years and had already decided he would wait as long as she needed. She got in the car. The penthouse was quiet in the way that expensive things are quiet. Not silence exactly. The absence of intrusion. The specific hush of a space that had been deliberately insulated from everything the city below couldn't stop producing. Alicia stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, still in the white dress. Veil gone. Shoes off. Bare feet on cold polished concrete that should have felt hostile and somehow didn't. 43 floors below, New York moved the way it always moved, without apology, without pause, without any acknowledgement whatsoever that two lives had just been rearranged inside one of its cathedrals. She pressed her fingers to the glass. Yoonghwa appeared from the corridor. He had shed the jacket. Collar open. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. The ink visible now, dark and deliberate against his skin. He carried 2 cups. Tea, not coffee. She noticed that. He had always noticed, without being told, that she switched to tea when she was running on empty. He set 1 cup on the ledge beside her hand. Didn't speak. Didn't require her to perform recovery on any particular schedule. Just stood beside her, looking at the same city. I used to stand at a window like this, Alicia said eventually. Her voice was different in this room, softer at the edges. The careful architecture of the last 2 years developing small, deliberate cracks. In the apartment on Hongangaro. Before everything. Yoonghwa looked at her profile. You'd wake up before me, he said. Every morning. Standing at the glass. I was trying to understand it, she said. The city. How something that enormous could just keep going. Regardless. A pause. Regardless of what was happening inside the buildings. He understood what she meant. She wasn't talking about Seoul. She turned from the window. Looked at him directly in the way she had always looked at him. Without the performance of fearlessness. Without pretending his world didn't have edges that cut if you weren't careful. Just honestly. The way very few people had ever looked at him. Were you angry? She asked. When I was gone. He considered the word. Angry, he repeated. Like he was holding it up to the light. Checking its accuracy. No, he said. I was reduced. She waited. Everything I have built, he said. Every system, every structure, every contingency. His jaw tightened slightly. None of it could locate one woman who didn't want to be located. I didn't want to be located, Alicia said softly. And I wanted nothing else. Something moved through his expression. Arrived. Settled. He crossed to the sofa and sat. Not at the edge. Not in the posture of a man maintaining the infrastructure of his authority. Fully. Like a man setting something down he had been carrying for longer than was reasonable. Alicia came and sat beside him. Not close enough to touch. Close enough that the distance was a choice rather than a default. Tell me about the 2 years, he said. Not a demand. A door, left open. She looked at her hands. The first 3 months were the worst. New city. No name anyone knew. I took whatever work I could find. Reception desk at a hotel on the west side, double shifts, tips and cash. She paused. I told myself it was temporary. That I was just waiting for it to be safe enough to come back. And then temporary started to feel permanent. And I stopped letting myself think about coming back. Because thinking about it. She stopped. Started again. Because thinking about it made the distance physical. Like something sitting on my chest. Yoonghwa was quiet for a moment. I know that weight, he said. She looked at him. I was 11, he said. When my mother left. He said it the way people say things they have never said in exactly this way. Not for the first time, but for the first time to someone they've decided deserves the original version. Not taken. Not lost. She chose to leave. And she left in the specific way that makes a child understand that they were not enough of a reason to stay. Alicia said nothing. She knew better than to fill that with comfort. Some things need to be placed in the room and simply witnessed. I built everything after that, he said, to ensure that nothing and no one could leave without my knowing. Without my consent. Without. He stopped himself. Looked at her. Without me understanding why. And did you? Alicia asked quietly. Understand why I left? Yes, he said. The moment I read those documents. He reached out then. Slowly. The way you reach for something you are no longer afraid of losing, because losing it once has already taught you everything fear had to offer. His hand covered hers. Warm. Still. Absolute. I'm not asking you to forgive the world that made you run, he said. His eyes met hers. I'm asking you to let me be the reason you stop. Alicia looked at him for a long moment. At the ink on his forearms. At the open collar. At the man underneath the architecture. The one who had stood at his own window for 2 years, reduced, waiting. She turned her hand over beneath his and held on. She turned her hand over and held on. 2 years of distance collapsed into one quiet moment on a penthouse sofa 43 floors above the city that tried to swallow them both. But here's what I need you to sit with. If someone left you to protect you from something you didn't know was coming, would you be able to trust them again? Or would the leaving always live somewhere between you? Tell me honestly in the comments. And if you are not in this community yet, Yoonghwa just opened a door he has kept sealed for 11 years. What walks through it next is for subscribers only. Join us. The elevator opened without warning. Not Kwon Beck. Not building security. Not anyone Yoonghwa had permitted. Anthony Roger stepped out, still in his wedding suit. White pocket square. The specific composure of a man who has spent his entire life walking into rooms and assuming they already belong to him. 2 men flanked him. Different from the cathedral security. Harder. The kind of hired wait that signals a man preparing for a conversation that might not go cleanly. Anthony's eyes moved across the penthouse, cataloging it the way he cataloged everything, assigning value, assigning ownership, until they landed on Alicia, still in the white dress, hand no longer in Yoonghwa's, but close enough that the proximity said everything Anthony had driven 43 floors to confirm. He smiled, not warmly. The smile of a man presenting evidence. There she is, Anthony said. His voice carried across the room like he was addressing a boardroom. Measured, amplified by confidence that had never once been seriously challenged. My bride. Alicia stood. Not from deference. From the specific instinct of a woman who has learned that some conversations require you to be on your feet. Anthony, do you know what they're saying downstairs? He moved further into the room. Unhurried. 400 guests. Journalists. My father's associates. He tilted his head. They're saying the bride ran off with a Korean crime lord. He let that sit. Do you understand what that does to everything I've built? Everything I extended to you. Alicia's jaw tightened. Extended to me, she repeated. Quiet. Exact. I gave you a life, Anthony said. And now the performance slipped? Just slightly, just enough to show the architecture underneath. A name. Security. A future. Do you have any idea what you were before I found you? The room temperature dropped. Yoonghwa hadn't moved. He stood with his arms loose at his sides, the most dangerous version of his stillness, the one that didn't announce itself. Anthony turned to look at him directly for the first time, and smiled again. Different this time. Sharper. You think you're saving her, Anthony said. That's almost touching. He reached inside his jacket, placed a folder on the glass table between them. Alicia Voss, he said, like a prosecutor reading a charge. No family. No assets. A 2-year employment gap she couldn't explain at interview. A woman who appeared in New York with a reference letter from a hotel that closed 8 months earlier. He opened the folder. Photographs. Documents. The clinical debris of a life assembled from borrowed pieces. I knew what you were from the second month, Anthony said. Looking at Alicia now. Not Yoonghwa. Because this was never about Yoonghwa. This was the attack he had been building since the moment he'd decided that her uncertainty was a resource he could monetize. I kept you anyway. Because I thought, he paused, performed consideration, that women like you understand gratitude in ways that women with options don't. Something happened in Alicia's chest. Not collapse. The opposite. The specific internal event that occurs when a thing you half believed about yourself is finally said aloud by the person who planted it, and lands not as truth, but as anatomy. She could see it now. Clearly. The entire construction. The way he had selected her uncertainty like a contractor selecting a site for what could be built on it. She looked at the folder, at the photographs of a life he had reduced to a dossier, and felt rage. Clean. Clarifying. The kind that doesn't burn outward but burns inward and leaves something harder in its place. She looked at Anthony. You're right, she said. He blinked. I had nothing when you found me. No family. No safety net. Nothing that would make a man like you take me seriously unless I was useful. She took one step forward. And you used every single one of those things to make sure I stayed small enough to need you. Anthony's smile thinned. Alicia, I want you both to leave. The room went still. Yoonghwa looked at her. Both, she said. Her eyes met his. Not anger. Not rejection. Something more precise than either. I need to stand in this room alone, she said. Without either of you deciding what I am. Anthony laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Yoonghwa said nothing. He looked at her for a long moment. Reading the specific expression he had memorized in a different city, in a different life. The one she wore when she had made a decision that was entirely, irreversibly hers. He picked up his jacket, walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and without a word to Anthony Roger, without acknowledgement, without a single glance, he stepped inside. The doors closed. Anthony stood in the middle of the penthouse. Suddenly, for the first time, looking exactly as small as he had always made her feel. Alicia stood alone in the penthouse for 11 minutes. She counted them. The city below continued its indifferent machinery. Sirens, light changes, the slow crawl of yellow cabs on streets that didn't pause for private reckonings. Anthony had left 4 minutes after Yoonghwa. Not gracefully. With the specific, brittle fury of a man unaccustomed to rooms that stopped organizing themselves around him. He'd taken his folder, his photographs, his clinical inventory of her inadequacy, and she had watched him go with the stillness of someone who has just realized that the thing they feared most lost its mass the moment it was finally spoken aloud. She pressed her palm flat against the window. Cold glass. Warm hand. The city going on regardless. Her phone buzzed on the ledge. Deja, she answered. Where are you? Deja's voice, warm, urgent, carrying the specific frequency of someone who has been worried since before they had a reason to be. I'm safe, Alicia said. That's not what I asked. Alicia almost smiled. I know. A pause. The man at the back of the cathedral, Deja said. The one who didn't sit down. Who looked at you like. She stopped. Reconsidered. Who is he, Alicia? Alicia looked at the city. The reason I ran, she said. And the reason I stopped. Deja was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet of someone assembling 2 years of unanswered questions into a shape they can hold. Are you sure? Deja said finally. No, Alicia said. Honest. But I think I'm done making decisions from fear. The elevator opened. She turned. Yoonghwa. Alone. No Quan Beck. No jacket this time. Just the dark shirt. The ink. The face she had spent 2 years teaching herself not to reach for. She hadn't called him back. He had come back. There was a difference. He crossed the room and stopped at a distance that gave her the choice of what happened next. That had always been the difference between him and Anthony. Not the power. The restraint of it. I made 3 calls, he said. His voice was different. Not the controlled, architectural tone of a man who governed from altitude. Stripped of that. The first, to my attorney. Dissolution of every shell company that carries my name in this city. Alicia stared at him. Yoonghwa. The second, to the federal liaison I have maintained for 9 years. Full voluntary disclosure. Every operation. Every structure. Everything those men threatened to place in front of a bureau to move you. He met her eyes. I placed it there myself. The room contracted. She understood what that meant. Not abstractly. Specifically. The empire he had spent 15 years constructing. Every acquisition, every alliance, every carefully negotiated arrangement that kept this city's machinery running under his hands. Laid open. Voluntarily. Publicly. Irreversibly. That will destroy everything you've built, she said. Yes, he said. No hesitation. And the third call? She asked. He reached into his shirt pocket. A single folded document. He placed it on the glass table between them. She picked it up. Unfolded it. A property transfer. This building. This penthouse. Every square foot of it. Transferred into one name. Hers. Whatever I am after this, he said. You will not be without ground to stand on. Not because of me. Not because of Anthony Roger. Not because of any man who decided your worth was a variable he controlled. His jaw tightened. Because it is yours. Full stop. No condition. No debt attached to it. Alicia looked at the document. At her name printed in clean, unambiguous type on the most valuable thing he had ever owned. Something broke open in her chest. Not grief. The specific, enormous relief of a woman who has been holding her own weight for so long that she has forgotten what it feels like to be believed. You didn't have to. I know, he said. That's why I did. Her phone buzzed again. Deja. A text this time. I'm downstairs. The lobby. I took a cab straight from the cathedral. I'm not leaving until I see your face. Also, I looked him up on the way over. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying. He came back. Men who are going to hurt you don't dismantle their empire first. Come downstairs. I need to see that you're okay. Alicia looked up from the phone. At Yunghua. At the document on the table. At the city beyond the glass. Enormous, indifferent, suddenly the exact right size for the life she was deciding to build. She folded the document carefully, placed it in the pocket of the white dress she was absolutely never wearing again, and looked at him. My cousin is downstairs, she said. I know, he said. I had her escorted from the cathedral 2 hours ago. She was persuasive about her intentions to find you. Alicia looked at him. You're going to have to earn her approval, she said. Something moved across his face. Real this time. Unhidden. I'm aware, he said. She's terrifying, Alicia said. So am I, he said. And for the first time in 2 years. Alicia laughed. The lobby was all marble and low light. Clean lines. The kind of architecture that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. Deja was standing in the center of it with her arms crossed, her locks loose now, her heels in her hand, because she had walked 6 blocks from the cathedral and Deja had never once suffered for aesthetics. She looked at Alicia coming out of the elevator, at the white dress, at the bare feet, at the expression on her face, open in a way Deja hadn't seen since before the running started. Then she looked at Yunghua, standing 1 step behind Alicia, not in front, not beside, 1 step behind. Deja held his gaze for a long moment. The specific, unhurried assessment of a woman who has been someone's person since the age of 7 and takes that appointment seriously. Yunghua met it without flinching, without performance. Deja looked back at Alicia. You're barefoot, she said. I know, Alicia said. In a 40-floor lobby. 43, Yunghua said. Deja looked at him. He looked back. A beat. I'm going to need coffee, Deja said. And a full explanation. In that order. They sat in a private room off the lobby. Low table. 3 cups. The particular quality of quiet that settles over people who have stopped performing and started simply being. Alicia talked. All of it. The lobby of the Meridian. The 3 men in suits. The documents. The specific calculation she had made. That disappearing was the only move that protected the person she couldn't afford to lose. Deja listened. The way Deja always listened. Without interruption, without rushing toward comfort, with the full, undefended attention of someone who understands that being heard completely is the rarest thing one person can offer another. When Alicia finished, Deja looked at her coffee cup for a moment, then looked up. You should have called me, she said. I know, Alicia said. I would have come. I know, Alicia said. That's why I didn't call. Deja's expression shifted. Arrived at something. Because you were protecting me too, she said. Alicia said nothing, which was its own answer. Deja looked at the ceiling briefly, the specific gesture of a woman declining to cry in a hotel lobby on principle. Then she looked at Yunghua. You dismantled your empire, she said. Yes, he said. For her. For the truth, he said. She was the reason I finally told it. Deja held his gaze. Another long moment. The assessment running its final calculation. Then she looked at Alicia. Okay, she said. Just that. But from Deja, okay was the full endorsement. Later. Much later, when the coffee was gone and Deja had taken a car back to her hotel with the specific, satisfied energy of a woman who had obtained all the information she required. Alicia and Yoonghwa sat alone again. Different room. Same quiet. She had changed. Someone on Yoonghwa's staff had produced, without being asked, a soft gray sweater and dark trousers that fit like they had been selected by someone who understood that what she needed was to stop being a bride and simply be herself. She sat with her feet tucked under her, cup in both hands, looking at nothing in particular. Just present. In a room. In a city. In a life she was choosing for the first time without fear as the architect. What happens now? She asked. Yoonghwa looked at her. What do you want to happen? She considered that. The actual question of it. Not what was safe. Not what was logical. Not what reduced the risk of loss. What she wanted. I want to work, she said. I was good at my job before all of this. I want that back. Then you'll have it, he said. I want Deja close, she said. She's the only family I have. I won't lose that again. Then she stays close, he said. And I want. She stopped. Looked at him. At the open collar. The ink. The face of a man who had spent 15 years building walls at altitude and had spent the last 6 hours taking them apart brick by brick in front of a federal liaison and a woman with locks and heels in her hand. I want you to stop running the city, she said. Not because of what it costs. Because of what it was costing you. His jaw moved slightly. And what was it costing me? The ability to simply be a person, she said. Instead of an infrastructure. He was quiet for a long time. The city turned outside the glass. Dark now. Full of its own relentless continuity. My mother left, he said. Because she said I was already becoming something she didn't recognize. A pause. I was 11. I know, Alicia said softly. I spent 20 years proving her wrong by becoming it completely. He looked at his hands. The ink. The history written there. Power is not, he said slowly, what I believed it was when I was building it. He looked at her. I believed power was the condition that made loss impossible. If you controlled enough, people, systems, outcomes, nothing could be taken from you. A beat. But you were taken from me. At the height of everything I had built. And the only thing that brought you back. He stopped. Was not the power, Alicia said. No, he said. It was simply the truth. She set down her cup, reached across the space between them, her hand against his jaw, warm, unhurried. The gesture of a woman who has stopped measuring the cost of reaching and started simply reaching. He went very still, the way he had gone still in the cathedral, but different. Not shock, not disbelief. The stillness of a man receiving something he stopped believing he deserved long before he had the language to understand what he was losing. Power, Alicia said quietly, is not what keeps people safe. She looked at him directly. It's the willingness to be known. Fully. Even by the parts of yourself you built an empire to outrun. She held his gaze. That's what this was always about. Not the city. Not the syndicate. Not Anthony Roger and his folder. Just two people, he said. Just two people, she said, choosing each other past every reason they'd been given not to. Outside, New York continued. Enormous. Indifferent. Exactly the right size. Inside, in a room 43 floors above it, two people sat in the particular quiet of lives that had just chosen, simply and irrevocably, to stop running and begin. Two people. 2 years. One cathedral. One truth finally spoken. And they simply chose each other. Here is the question I want you to carry into the comments. Is love still love if it was built on distance? Or does it only become love the moment someone chooses to close it? Tell me what you think. And if this story moved something in you, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell. Because the next story coming to this channel makes this one look like a warm-up. You don't want to arrive late.